Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to talk about Phantoms from 1998. So before there were symbiotes and before there were Legion, and we could go on and surmise that one becomes many, we would have to go on and take quite a bit of time within a film to figure out what the heck Phantoms were within 1998. So we had a movie called Jay and Silent Bob Strikes Back, and they would go on and reference this film when Jason Mewes' character goes on and talks to Ben Affleck and talks about how dope Phantoms was, and that is a kind of funny little Easter egg. But we also go on and we have a film that is to give us something that we've never quite seen enough of, which is a monstrous being that isn't all well defined, but is to seemingly be so ridiculously powerful that we're just naturally going to assume that it's not going to be so quite easily beaten, even to the point of dialogue in the film going on and sitting at school, hey, like, can we just kind of pour acid over it, or could we just nuke it? And Dr. Flight goes on and tells Lisa, it's like, well, like, where would you go on and put the target? How would you, in 100% certainty, be sure that you wiped it out and defeated it? Like there's no guarantee. There's no a way of really and truly knowing. And that ends up being what the ancient evil is, the Prolethium, and what eventually is to be called Phantoms. And so I had gone on and seen this once when I was a younger lad, and the only thing that I remembered about it was the whole dog thing, and also like some certain members of the cast of this film, and that's about all that I remembered. Because logically in my brain, like, there's only so much I can remember. And also, this movie was a little bit scary, in all honesty, so maybe that's all the more reason why when I was a kid I probably tried to wipe it out of my brain. Uh, so now I would still say that this movie is kind of scary if you haven't gone on and really seen it. Uh, there's a lot of building going on in this film, and not all of the build like pays out, I think, at certain points. It's all about just kind of the mystery of what's going on, and then eventually the mystery of what this Phantom's being ancient evil is, and trying to figure out how to define it, where it could be a god or a devil or just an animal, and that it is somehow to, when attaching itself to then the human race, like the human race is to give its knowledge to this ancient evil, and that is how it is to go on and try to figure out how to scare or intimidate itself against the human race, but then also wanting to go on and need press for itself, I guess, because it is to be just so much of a grandiose like being that now it wants a headline in a newspaper somewhere, or they want to go on and be the cover of People or something. Like, that's just kind of, in all honesty, very weird for me how this ancient evil wants to go on, and he wants everybody to know, or it uh it having people know, like, what it is. Why does it care? Like, is it going on and like wanting to give the human race prep time for some weird reason? To be like, hey man, like I don't want it to go on and just be like a one-sided like fight where I know I'm gonna wipe out the whole entire human race, but like I want to see what they can do with just a little bit of knowledge of me, since I know so much about them, and like let's really see how this is all uh, gonna work out at the end of this tale, and this and that. So so now I have to go on and I have to state here that there's gonna be a lot of comparisons to this movie, but then also uh, I feel now I have to go on and state this movie. I feel, or this idea, is to have way more potential for a movie and show than any other thing that is to be out there. Because in all honesty, you can take this idea and you could make it with any kind of movie or show budget whatsoever. You could do anything with it, I feel. And that could go on and immediately have me state that this idea is just an epic idea and it's wow, it's off the chain, crazy, whatever. But I have to go on and compare and grade a film, not an idea. So, with that said, this movie has a made for TV like quality, and I'm not going to go on and grade this movie because of that. I honestly would go on and state that I feel like this movie doesn't do enough with the hour and a half that it has to do something within it. It is a very slow burn. It's a very slow and a lot of build for, I think, not enough that you can do with a ancient evil that can do whatever. It can do anything, it seems. But then you can't really do anything really within this movie besides like the mystery of what this thing is, and eventually trying to define what it is, and like that, those two things, the mystery of it and the defining of it, like takes so long into this film. And then just kind of in between it, you're just like, okay, like, why is this town the way it is? That also takes like a good chunk of time going on in this film also, and the people meeting up with one another and figuring out what's going on, and like that takes up so much time in the film. You're not going on and spending more time on this creature going on and just killing, murdering, and throttling through this whole entire town, because it seems that this movie did not have that kind of money to have a whole entire being, in a very almost like blob like sense, just take down an entire town. You're not seeing that happen. You're kind of seeing the aftermath for the most point of this film, which that kind of sucks. So I would go on and state, though, that this movie is a solid good film. I really did enjoy it. And made me go on and made me want to compare it to stuff like Venom or the Pennywise It movies, and wanted me to go on and like think of just like kind of like Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of, and to really almost want to like at first compare it to a lot of those kind of like zombie movies, like, or zombie shows like The Last of Us, or possibly that one zombie like movie that had the word comment in it, where it's done during like Christmas time, and like Night of the Comet, I think is what it was called. I'm not quite sure. Because that movie kind of had like, I feel possibly like a very small budget, but it does kind of do an interesting enough amount of stuff within what it tries to accomplish within that film. And so what we get here is we have Lisa and Jenny that are to go on and leave a mother who is to be a drinker to make their way into this town. because Jenny is to be this Surgeon General. And so she goes, or so these two girls go into the town, and they start to find that there are a lot of people just kind of laying on the ground, or a lot of people that it looks like they're dead, but they're dead in an unusual manner. So they go on and make their way through the town, where all of a sudden, like, every single one of the cars in this town are completely dead for some unusual reason. And so they make their way to the cops. And then the cops go on and they're with these girls, and they're making their way through this town trying to discover that it seems that this ancient evil is to have a way of connecting into a number of things within this world, and a number of underground wires and stuff like that, to tap into electricity and sirens and all these things, and to then go on and attach itself on to animals, uh, and create its own kind of uh, weirdish, monstrous beings, which are to, I guess, not be so easily defined by me of what the heck that one monster even was in this film. I guess it just had to be whatever it needed to be for that film, because you couldn't really see what it was because of either poor CGI or rationally just the fact that it's like, okay, like, this is just a little monstrous thing that we just have in this one little scene, but we can't do anything else past that that is just like that, with the exclusion of the third act, which is to be what they do with Stu, and what eventually ends up becoming the big, massive CGI monster thing, which ends up being the Mother Mass entity thing. This movie is to be so easily defined, yeah. No kidding. So yeah, so this movie was solid good, almost great. And where can you go on and see said film? And eventually, maybe be scared by it because you maybe haven't seen it in so long, or you maybe have never seen it. And if you aren't scared of this movie, you'll be like, man, okay, all right, like, well, you just might have just balls of steel. Because, man, I was like, when they were doing all the build-ups in this film, I was actually legitimately like, man, I'm getting kind of uneasy in this movie. What the movie? All right, like, give me that stupid sludge thing, but whatever. Um, because the only thing that I remembered about this movie was the whole dog thing, and I remember the certain actors or actresses that were in this film, and that was about it. I didn't remember anything about this movie. And so when going back into it, I was like, oh yeah, all right, yeah, like, I think I remember this bit and this piece and this thing here. But man, was this so quickly forgettable. Easily understanding why I forgot about it. Um, so yeah, so now the comparisons. Where can you go on and see this film also? It's available for free on Play-Doh TV. Currently, at the second this recording, you can go on and see this. After you go on and download this app, you can see this movie for absolutely free. There's no subscriptions for that thing, it's seemingly so far. Go ahead and check it out there, or you can go onto an app called Zelifonic, Zelivonic. I've been using this app for a very long time, and you can go on and watch Phantoms there for absolutely free, as well as a cluster of huge other kind of bits of content that you wouldn't be able to go on and see anywhere else, with the exclusion of its exclusive wherever it's from. Like, if you had to go on and specifically need to see a movie in Netflix, you can go on and see it on Zelifonic also for absolutely free, depending on when it's to be released. You can go on and see theater movies in Zellophonic. Yeah, there might be a lower quality like version of it, but eventually also when there's going to be a premium thing of X number of dollars on Amazon or something somewhere, you can go on and go to that app there and see it for free. So all the more reason to check that app out. So without a doubt, you can go on and see a cluster of stuff that you wouldn't be able to see anywhere else, or go on and at least see a bulk of things because there's certain bits of movies and shows that I found out like, oh, they don't have this on this app. Well, I guess I have to go somewhere else for that. But uh, like that is to just have me go on and say that I've kind of seen everything within that app. That I'm really just trying to figure out what isn't on there and narrow it down that way. But anyways, let's go on and let's uh, compare this movie. So immediately I'd have to go on and compare it to John Carpenter's The Thing in a lot of ways. Uh, Also, I would have to go on and compare it to the Pennywise It movie because that seemed very similar. When you go on, you have the Mother Mass ancient being thing that is kind of to be underground, where all the drones and everything like that are to be on the surface trying to scare and and kill people and need to choose certain people to go on, go on and do its bidding is kind of just really interesting. Uh, Kind of almost like a vampire in a lot of ways, but not exactly. Almost kind of like the first Fright Night, but again, that's I'm getting really into just the thinnest of comparisons. Uh, but yeah, like of course, obvious like Venom, like because it feels in a lot of ways so much like a symbiote like thing. Uh, I would almost want to go on and have it be kind of the way it's like story wise put together, kind of in some ways like Independence Day, where you go on, you have to have the guys go on and find like the mothership to go on and figure out a way to like nuke that thing. Like in a lot of ways, like it's like stories are kind of similar. Uh, but like as far as budget is concerned, drastically different. Um, but anyways, because this has kind of like a made for TV movie, just kind of early made for TV movie kind of quality to it. But anyways, with that said, I feel that's about as much as I feel that I want to go on and compare it to, because I could probably go all over the place, and I just want to pull back to just kind of take less a bit of time, because I know that I'm in an hour and a half time crunch, and I definitely know I'll probably get to just 2 hours probably, because that's why I just talk about all these films. So with that said, let's push on and let's get into full on spoilers. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Phantoms 1998, if you had gone on and seen this as a kid and it traumatized you, or whichever. Maybe this movie was to have hurt your heart at some point, or maybe think that the human race is doomed. Because logically, it's like, well, yeah, like, could you just imagine what had all gone on to exist on this planet Earth that we don't even know still is to be out there somewhere and is just kind of waiting for its time to just be like, yeah, like I've kind of run out of my food source. Let's try humans for a while. Let's see if they taste like chicken. Meh, like, let's see what happens there. And like, it's just kind of weird how this thing is giving the human race prep time to just like, hey man, I want to see if you guys can figure out how to beat me. But yeah, so and I want to go on and I want to be the poster boy on People magazine. Like that's just so weird. Uh, but anyways, I think it's about that time to do that song and dance. It's about time to go into spoilers. This character, of course, to be called Copperfield, and I thought that also was really funny. But anyways, let's go on and let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. I'm going to, of course, go on and again pause this review right here to whip up my phone and be able to have via cast list or whatever I insist as far as to be notes upon my phone to be able to help me go on and say whatever I need to say to talk about this movie even further in detailish away. So, with that said, I'm going to pause here. I will be back in a second. Okay, by the way, one also line that I love that they had in here where Dr. Fly ends up saying that the ancient evil is chaos in the flesh. And I was like, man, that is a dope line. Um, but so, I would go on and I would let everybody know, specifically in the one scene where they're going on in the town and the lights are starting to flicker and everything. More than likely, if your volume is up at all really high, probably lower it down at that point. Because there's a bunch of sirens and stuff going on, so just kind of letting everybody know that so they won't get so annoyed by the alarms and all the crap that are going on in the town at the one scene, and then you can adjust your volume accordingly. There, I think, is to be really in my mind like three actual jump scares I feel in this film, and logically I'll go on and I'll explain those. Uh, but if anything, like I think those three jump scares, like they do have a lot of long builds to them, so you should obviously know that they're jump scares. Like the whole broken window thing, jump scare, the whole sink thing, jump scare, and then what is the third one? I know that there's three of them. I'm trying to think whatever the third one is. Uh, oh, the dog thing. The dog thing is technically a jump scare, but like again, that is the slowest build of jump scares to where you kind of know something's going horribly awry, or they even can kind of tell you that it's like, yeah, you probably should not go on. You should not be touching that dog. So, anyways, let's get into this film. I've taken too much time to talk about this whole film. So, we have Lisa, we have Jenny, who are driving, making their way. So here's a way to just stall out your film as best as you can to just kind of let the early credits roll, the opening credits roll, is by a driving sequence, because you always have to have one of these in the beginning of most films. Or there always has to be a number of shots within a town that is to just showcase the town. That's how they open every single movie and show that has ever gone on and existed in our lives, it seems. But it's always interesting. So we have Lisa, and she's going on and talking to her boyfriend Ronnie, and is going on and stating that Jenny had gone on to abduct her, and that her abductee was a person that looks similar to her, like looks like her sister. Oh yeah, the sergeant general or the surgeon general, and that kind of builds up some backstory or some understanding of who Jenny is. Because for how Jenny is to go on and know certain things right away, where it's like, how does she know that? We have to go on and realize that she's the Surgeon General, and so she must have a compiling of knowledge that is to make her just kind of think out these scenarios of oh, okay, well, like logically, like this person didn't get murdered because where is the blood? Like where is it? Like where is the sign of struggle? This and that. But anyways, so as Lisa's going on and she's continuing to try and talk to Ronnie to give up her phone number for him to try and call her more, we have Jenny that speeds up to make her way to this tunnel for them to lose phone conversation. So Lisa gets a little irritated with Jenny for doing that. And so Jenny's telling Lisa, it's like, well, hey, like, this is a reason why I brought you here to kind of get you away from our past, to have Lisa also say, it's like, well, yeah, like you're just trying to get me away from Ronnie. And Jenny's like, well, maybe. I don't know. So we have Lisa that is going on and asking Jenny, it's like, well, hey, like, how often do you really go on and you have people within this town? And during the winter, it's 400, but then during seemingly summer or tourist season, there's to be 4,000. So it's like, okay, that is a drastic change in population from certain kind of times of the year. So that goes on and tells me that this is some kind of weird tourist, or this is some kind of seasonal place to live, but not year round, it seems. So they make their way to the residence office of course, Jenny. And so Jenny's going on and turning to Lisa and is telling her, it's like, well, hey, like you're gonna go on, you're gonna need to meet Hilda, like the housekeeper of the gods. And so it seems that Hilda was to be putting together some apple pie. And so they go on to make their way to try and find Hilda, and Hilda is dead on the ground, sadly enough. So they're going on and they're trying to figure out like what had happened to Hilda, and they're like, oh well, was she like murdered? It looked like she was beaten to death. And Jenny's like, well, no, she died suddenly. Like she wasn't tortured, she wasn't whatever, because there's no blood and there's no signs of struggle. So because dead body, we then have them go on to possibly still have some speculation that there still might be a murderer on the loose. But they go on and they take to the phone to find out that the phone is dead. Because of course it's dead. Because horror film. So they make their way back to the car and the car is dead because of course it is. So they decide, okay, well, hey, like the police station is 4 blocks from here, so let's hoof it, let's walk. So by the time that they make it to the police station, they go and find a a deputy named Henderson, who is also dead. And it's like, all right, okay, like we're just finding some dead bodies here. All right, one of these dead bodies is a lot like the other. One of these bodies are dead. Anyways, moving on. That was stupid. So we have Jenny that is looking at this police officer's dead body and realizing that it's possible that this could just be a disease and it could be some kind of unusual outbreak of some kind. And they're going on and they're looking at the fact that Henderson or Paul uh, was to have had a gun in his hand and was to pull the trigger within his own head. So, come to find out also, Paul had gone on and unloaded quite a bit of bullets rather than a brain to his own head. And they go on and like, well, hey, like you weren't shooting at the disease, were you, Paul? Like you had to have been shooting at something. So again, like they question where the heck is the blood on this guy's body? Like where is the blood? So We also have Lisa, who is very upset with Jenny here, really for how the fact that Lisa was dragged into this, and now she may go on and die because of being in a place that she didn't want to be, because she was happy with being with Ronnie and away from all this. Now she might die because she's in all this and that, so on and so forth. So because the two girls are still not quite easily being able to define exactly what's going on right now, they decide to find weaponry, find shotguns. And so, oddly enough, we have a shotgun like cabinet thing that is really easy to break into. As Jenny just takes this chair and just breaks into the cabinet, and they just start, okay, let's start taking all these shotguns out and just start putting ammo in them. And Jenny can't figure out how to do it, so Lisa has to grab it from her and say, okay, here, there you go. Like, I guess it's good to have been living in LA now, isn't it? So we have Lisa that is trying to rationalize to Jenny, like, how this disease could have possibly have spread. And so she's like, well, like, is there a nuke plant around? Like, is there some military base that's maybe experimenting on dimensions or something? Man, if she would have gone on and tried to tie this into like the movie The Mist or something, that would have been kind of funny. But anyways, uh, like, this disease has to be done with some kind of radiation. It's like, well, I don't know, like radiation doesn't exactly kill this way. So, like, if anything, they're just like how Jenny says, like, there'd be burns present, there'd be like, uh, there'd be lesions, there'd be some kind of sign of radiation poisoning of some kind. But anyways, so both Lisa and Jenny decide that they're going to go to this bakery that they know some people or they're familiar with to kind of see, hey, if they're alive, like, is anybody alive in this town? Because when they're driving through the town, like, the interesting thing that they realize is how dead the town is, like how there's nobody kind of walking by, and they thought that that was kind of very peculiar off the bat. So both Jenny and Lisa are trying to find some common people just to see if they themselves are possibly still alive. So they realize that they can't go through the front of this bakery. So they're turning around and they're looking for Jacob and Anna. And so they make their way to the back entrance. So they enter into the bakery, and this is to be where, of course, we're seeing like the kitchen and the back of this whole thing. And so we have Jenny who's calling for Jacob and Anna, and we come to find that there is to be uh, this uh, this roller that has these hands that are chopped off, and they're still trying to demise or figure out whether that this could be of just some kind of murderous killer person that is going on and doing all this. And so they go on to hear there's a ding over by this oven. And so, like, okay, what could be within the oven? And so we have Lisa who is hoping, okay, I hope it's just the cakes. So they open this oven, and there seem to just be pies there. And then all of a sudden the heads fall, and so they start running like madmen, because, of course, why wouldn't you rationally go on and do that? So Jenny rushes to the phone and is to grab the phone, and we don't have a normal dial tone, and we realize that this phone is dead again. But then again, we also have this unusual kind of mumbling or and Jenny's going on and like, "What do you want? What is it?" You know, it would have been actually funny if the creature being thing would have actually gone on and answered like large pizza, McDonald's fries. I don't know, it would have been funny, but anyways. So we have Lisa, and we then have uh Jenny that are to go on and further make their way into town. And they then bump into both Stu and Bryce and Steve, who are the sheriff and the deputies of this town. I'm gonna go on and probably completely forget that Steve even exists because, in all honesty, Steve doesn't really exist in this film in my eyes. Like this guy just go on and do nothing in this movie, and then he dies, and then I could not have cared because he didn't do anything in this movie anyways. Like it's all really carried by both Bryce and, in a lot of ways, Stu is the heavily good or heavily good used character in this movie. For how also he is to be this kind of unhinged guy, where Bryce is consistently asking Stu, it's like, well, hey man, like, are you okay? Are you okay? Or are you? What's going on? Like, and like, there is no like understanding why Bryce is consistently asking Stu why he's okay. There's never a backstory that comes up with that. Bryce doesn't go on and say to Stu, it's like, well, hey man, like, you know what? Like, I know you've had a really dark past, but hey, like, let's go on and kind of focus on the now instead of our past and whatever. And, like, because we really need to focus on what's going on now because it's a life or death situation, and we need to just kind of be uh, just kind of at our best here, at not our wits end. But again, there's like nothing to set up why Bryce is asking Stu so often, like, well, hey man, like, how are you feeling? How like how are you hanging? Like, come on, like, so like I said, so we have the sheriff go on and meet with Jenny and Lisa. And so Jenny and Lisa are to go on and like go on and give them their story about what all happened. So Stu makes his way to the oven to open it up, and so Bryce ends up looking in on the Stu. It's like, hey man, you okay? As Stu is just kind of just chewing bubblegum and like, yep, all right. So Bryce is just like, okay, Stu, let's go. So Bryce goes on and tells Steve he actually has him do something in this film. I'm sorry for the actor that goes on and plays Steve, but like, you didn't do anything in this film. Sadly enough, you were a guy who acted and did a thing, but you didn't do enough of the thing to really matter. Sadly enough. Uh, I hope you went on and did way more important things in your career, but this just wasn't it. So we have Bryce that is telling Steve, it's like, well, hey man, like, yeah, we definitely need some forensics here. We need even more deputies. Uh, we need like everybody that we can possibly get, this and that, whatever, what have you. And we immediately have Jenny that's like, no, like, do not like call anybody and their brother to this situation because we haven't clearly defined it yet. Like, we don't know like how easily spread this is. Like, we don't know like if it's toxic. Like, we don't quite know uh like what is exactly to be what is to have happened with these people. It could be a killer, or it could be some environmental thing. If anything, like eventually, when even Copperfield is to make his way to the sheriff, he's like, okay, like what is it? Like, is it biochemical? What is it? And like, is it other? So, but also Jenny's more concerned about the risk of spreading things. So the sheriff is like, okay, well, we just kind of need to figure this out now. We just kind of need to figure this out so we can justify uh calling in specifically who we need to call in to get this matter nipped in the butt, metaphorically speaking. So they make their way through the town, and so Steve is talking about how Henderson was on the phone and the line had just went dead, and they talked about how he used to be in the FBI, uh, like, uh, like, like Bryce and him, who is Steve, and so Henderson was a good cop and he didn't make much mistakes. And Stu is like, well, yeah, he made one mistake and that led to his death. So Bryce is going on and having the question because everybody has to ask questions in this freaking film. Bryce is go on and realize that since Paul Henderson was to be such a skilled person with to have gone on and worked at the FBI, why is it that this guy could not have gone on and taken down the threat that he had gone up against? Why was it that he could not have legitimately have seen his attacker and taken him out? So here is where we start to get the goofiness going on in town. And so all of a sudden the light starts flashing, all of a sudden all the alarms start going off. And so eventually there's the flickering and flashing of these lights. Everybody's like, okay, what's going on? So eventually all the lights are to focus upon this one candle glow in, this one hotel. And they realize, like, okay, I guess we need to go here for some reason. And again, as Stu is to start to make his way to the inn, we again have Bryce that turns again Stu around and be like, hey man, you okay? Yeah, you okay? Again, with all of this, with the okay. So we have Jenny that is going on and even going further with the cops here because specifically for a disease, not all diseases affect both animals and both humans alike. So at some point, even if there is an airborne disease that goes on and affects humans, it not always affects dogs as well. Of course, you would also have gone on to have heard like kind of different kind of things of like kind of COVID and stuff like that. When that was to be a thing of like, oh, well, can it affect dogs and pets and whatever as well as humans? So, but if anything, Jenny is going on of like, hey, have you guys heard any barking lately? Like, see any dogs or cats kind of roaming around anywhere? And they're like, well, no. It's like, like, doesn't that make any kind of like alarms going off in anybody's head? To just like, you know what, like not only have they kind of wiped out like the people here and made them almost kind of vanish or not existent, but then also we don't see a lick of any real pets of any kind roaming around. Just so telling us that when eventually you're going to go on and see one, you're probably going to be second guessing that also. Which I think that's a very interesting way to just kind of foreshadow things to be going forward. So they make their way into the inn and they realize that there are only 4 rooms being booked in this entire place. So they should probably go on and look into those rooms to see if there's going to be certain people in there. So, but they also have a thought process of maybe that the manager's apartment might also have somebody in there as well. So they make their way up this flight of stairs, and so both Stu and both Bryce go on and start making their way through these certain specific rooms. As Lisa, Jenny, and Steve are just kind of well away from wherever they're going into to check these rooms out. So Bryce goes into one room as Stu breaks into another. And Bryce goes on and is to look into this closet and is to all of a sudden see this little kid there that is holding this gun. Foreshadowing that this character will eventually go on and have this whole entire story about why he was kicked out of the FBI was simply that he had gone on and in one case had accidentally shot a kid, and the kid had a gun, and like it seemed that Bryce ended up finding out that the gun was a toy, but Bryce didn't know any better, and so he just shot the kid, sadly. And he always goes on and he carries a picture of the kid and the news article of it. And Jenny's going on and comforting Bryce and telling him, it's like, well, like, man, why do you hold the picture of this kid every day? Like, isn't that kind of torture? And Bryce is like, well, so I won't forget him. And so he won't be forgotten. But anyways, getting that now out of the way, instead of having me go on and say that whole stretch of thing later on. So Stu goes on and he breaks into his room, and eventually then goes on to go into another, and Stu goes into 204, and here's where we see that this girl is laying on this bed, and the room that Bryce is in, that is the room that ends up having the radio that is playing the one song that is to seemingly be the theme song for this monstrous being, that ends up like, I'm falling to pieces. Yeah, that song is to be weirdly the song of this monster, which, in all honesty, like, how is that song to just be like the song of this monster? Like, you could have gone on and had a number of other things, but then again, like, that ends up just kind of being the song. Maybe it was just copyrighted, like the easiest song to use, or maybe it was also just kind of in the book. But either way, could have used a better song. You really could have, but anyways, it is what it is. So Stu ends up going on to look at the girl, ends up taking off his glove and is touching the girl on the leg. And we have to assume that maybe Stu is probably going to desecrate this body of this corpse. But by the time that he tries to do anything, Bryce comes in and it's like, hey, like, what are you looking for? What are you doing? And Bryce is just like, oh, are you looking for clues? And so Bryce ends up telling Stu, it's like, hey, just watch the hallway. Like, just, like... So Stu ends up going on to bring the Dr. Jenny in to the room that he was in. because the room that he was in, where he adjusted that radio to have us realize that they specifically needed to go to this room, and that also there is to have been this door that is to be locked on the outside and or on the inside, and the only way that anybody could have gone on and gotten out of that room was to have been the fact of them having to like kind of phase out of the room or something because there was no windows. But we come to find out that the monster ends up using the sinks to be able to just kind of get around. And so they go to this room that says Timothy Flight, the Ancient Evil, and it's like, okay, all right, so like that's telling us who the monster is, and that's telling us that this monster wants this specific Timothy Flight guy to make his way into town. So they're like, okay, who the fuck is Timothy Flight? I don't know who this guy is. So, but also it's like, well, hey, like, why would somebody want to go on and lock themselves into a room that they can't get out of and disappear with no explanation of how and want to write the ancient evil or the ancient enemy and Timothy Flight? Like, what does that mean? So and then also, like, if there was to have been a person writing with lipstick, where is the lipstick? So many questions. So they go on into a room and they realize that there is a bed with just a cluster of crap within it, like gold teeth, buttons, all kinds of nonsensical things, and they're trying to rationalize it all. Like they're thinking like, well, is this some kind of shrine or what is this? We come to find that the monster's being is to dump all of these things off with a reasoning of this is crap that it does not need to exist. Like eventually we'll come to find in one of the uh, piles of crap that there is to even be like a pacemaker within there, because I guess the being doesn't need a pacemaker to continue to exist because it's that strong. So but if anything, they're tying it on to things like Nazis and saying in the camps they'd leave anything of value. And and strip them to their skins. So if anything, Stu is going on and looking at this still as possibly a killer and just be like, well, hey, like whoever this is, like really like has an edge where it's going on and even further, like taking out a peacemaker out of somebody's body. So they go on and they look at the list of people who have possibly been in this hotel, and Timothy is not one of them. So there are 7 people in those 4 rooms, and maybe any one of them could still be alive. So also Lisa is to rationalize that there was no mistake that they had to have come here. It seems that whatever this ancient evil is to go on and be is to have figured out a way to drive them to this one location and drive them to go to that room, because Timothy is to be important to this being, and the being wanted them to specifically find this message. So Bryce is like, okay, well, hey, I'll go on and like I'll put the name through the headquarters and see what it does. So we all of a sudden in the distance go on and hear that somebody's yelling and screaming. So Steve rushes off thinking that he needs to go on and help whoever this is. So Steve rushes off. Bryce is telling Steve to wait. And so by the time that Steve makes his way outside, we find Steve's boot and Steve's gun, and again, no blood. So we turn around and we have Bryce and everybody who makes their way to the radio to call for help. And they're going on and stating about Timothy Flight and the ancient enemy, and they spell out his name, 10-4 Sheriff. So we would then go on and have Bryce state like everything that he needs to be done, roadblocks to turn everybody away. Nobody's going to get in or out of this town because they don't quite know really what's going on still. Federal assistance, all the bells and whistles, all the biological or chemical and bacteriological whatever people, like, just send everybody. So all of a sudden, while Bryce is calling these people through this radio, the radio eventually goes dead, and all of a sudden there's this kind of weird, unusual voice through the radio, and Jenny ends up telling Bryce, like, well, yeah, that was the same for me, that I was getting that on the phone. So Lisa is kind of having a conspiracy that there may not be any help coming whatsoever, but eventually there will be. And so Stu is looking at everybody. It's like, well, I guess we're on our own. We're gonna freaking die here. So, but if anything, Bryce is to remind Stu. It's like, well, hey, like, we're gonna have law and order here. Like, we're gonna have a chain of command, and this has to be a managed response. And Stu is just like, seriously? Like, that's what you're gonna tell me is a managed response? So Stu is trying as much as possible to just kind of keep his together and like just try and become a better cop here. But like, people are dead, people are missing. His hit at the fan. So the next thing they go on and do is they take the Henderson body and put it in a body bag, and they start putting as many guns and bullets into them as they possibly can. So both Bryce and Stu are going on and putting bullets in guns, and Stu is going on and talking about how there's a possibility that Bryce is going to end up with Jenny, and Bryce ends up looking at Stu. It's like, what are you talking about this for? Like, cut the crap. Like, I don't want you talking about this. Like, I don't want you to talk at all. Like, I don't want you to have any conversation whatsoever. And but Stu keeps going on, and he's like, well, yeah, that girl is pretty cute too. And so Bryce gets just so upset with Stu that he goes on and chokes him. And Stu is looking at Bryce, he's like, well, hey, like, we still have witnesses here, like, managed response, eh? So still bejokingly. So all of a sudden the phone goes off, and the phone goes into a speaker phone, and so there's a weird sound coming from the phone again, and so Bryce at this point in time now is to just go on and just start thinking if he can just go on and just talk to this thing, and like, who are you? Like, what are you? What is this? So all of a sudden the lights go out into the police station, And so they turn on the flashlights and they whip out whoever is to go on and logically have guns at this moment, or who is to get guns. And so, which is to be all four of them, because they're all blasting away as if this is kind of like the Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator moment, where like they see something that's kind of flickering around in the woods and they just blast everything that they can in the entire woods. It's an epic scene, but like that's what kind of happens here. So there's all of a sudden this like batting of something into the window, and we have to assume that it's possibly via Lisa's mind a bird, but it's definitely not a bird. We come to find that it's a giant moth-like creature that is just so weird looking. But anyways, so but we briefly get to see it anyways because CGI and this and that is just poor. So they're asking if it's a bird, but they're like, well, no way it's a bird. It's got to be something else. So the more that this thing is kind of flickering at this window, the more that they decide to just light into it, and everybody is shooting this thing all at once. And they're all thinking, like, because of how damaged the window is, like, well, did we get it? And so it was like, well, there's definitely no way that this thing is gonna be coming back because we've like definitely put like 30 possible bullets into this thing and we've probably killed it 30 times. So Lisa is having the weird consensus that there might be daybreak if help is coming, because we really have to just figure out a way to just build more suspense that there might be somebody helping them. Or Lisa herself is trying to build up hope. I don't know why. But so this goes on and leads, since Stu was so close to this window, he ends up getting grabbed in the face by this moth like creature and slammed against this wall. And so this again has us realize, like, okay, they need to go on and figure out a way to try to kill this monster again, blast into it while it's kind of separated from Stu. So they eventually do go on and kill this monsterish moth-like creature, and then they look at Stu, who has gone on and uh, the monster had eaten his face, had gone on to get most of the soft tissue, even a good just whole brain of Stu, which doesn't make sense for how massive the brain logically is. It's 6 to 7 pounds, and like there's no way that that a that a normal creature can consume that so quickly within the number of pure just seconds that it had to latch on to Stu. It makes no real sense. So they're trying to figure out that maybe Stu was picked specifically, and Lisa is starting to think that whoever they're facing off against is probably the devil, and he wants to dance with all of them. I don't know what it is with there always being that weird, goofy thing. Like, have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? Like, I don't know why that seems to be in every single movie around this time period. That like everybody just weirdly wants to dance with the devil. It's freaking weird. But they always kind of fit it in some kind of movie somewhere. I don't know why that becomes a thing. So now transitioning us to uh, the wide world of news, uh, and so we have these two federal agents that will quickly just become non-existent beings, and we don't really have to care what their names are. But us just calling them FBI agents is to just be like not really caring what really their names are, even though they're both Wilson and Hawthorne. So Wilson and Hawthorne go into this very shady ash like newspaper uh place, and or whatever kind of tabloids, whatever place where they go on and they do all these goofy stories that don't make any logical like sense. Like, hey, if Elvis is still alive, where could he be? Those kind of goofy tabloidish like stories. And then we could joke about it in some point of this film. So the two federales are going on and wanting to speak with Timothy Flight here, and Timothy is to go on and state that at some point, because of his theories and him trying to go on and talk about chaos in the flesh, had gone on and rubbed a lot of certain specific people the wrong way to then force him to now be working at this place because it's a living. And so the two FBI agents are wanting to go on and have Timothy go along with them because it's a matter of national security. And if anything, it seems that Timothy is to know more about the ancient evil or the ancient enemy more so than anyone else is in existence. And is seemingly to concoct a bunch of stories that are to be possibly tied with the ancient evil. So, back with Jenny and Lisa, or no, wait, Jenny and Bryce, my bad. So, here's where we go on and we have the story about Jenny stating how they how Jenny and Lisa left because her mother was a drinker, and also Bryce's story about the kid that he ended up shooting. So we come to find the two body bags are kind of missing, and we also see that the sink is consistently pouring water or dripping water, foreshadowing to us that we have to realize that this monster goes on and uses the sink to kind of get through everything. And not a lot of people are kind of figuring that out right now. So Lisa is to finally come to Jenny and Bryce and it's like, well, hey, I gotta go in the shitter. Like, I gotta go. So Bryce goes with Lisa to the bathroom and starts looking at the stalls. Like, well, hey, like, it looks like you're good to go. Like, I'll leave you to your business. So Lisa goes on and she used to take her cigarette and she's starting to hear some things, starting to get a little weirded out. So all of a sudden she hears a flush, and so she looks into one of the stalls and there's nobody in the stalls. Would have been a good time to do a jump scare, but they really didn't do that all that well, because what ends up happening is Lisa is just to kind of turn around to have Stu appear in front of her with black eyes, and then all of a sudden the eyes appear, and he's like, "Well, you do look pretty cute." So Lisa rushes out of the bathroom as to say, like, "Oh my God, Stu is in there." And so Bryce goes in the bathroom and is checking the bathroom. It's like, well, there was nothing in there. So they go on and they check the bodies, and the bodies are gone. It's like, well, hey, the bodies couldn't have just evaporated. That doesn't make any sense. And so again, they realize, like, well, yeah, there's no way for these bodies to have escaped anywhere. So again, they don't think of the sink. So all of a sudden, they end up hearing of the helicopter. And so they rush outside to eventually find this chopper is to be making their way close to them, and they're like kind of waving them down, like, hey man, yeah, hey, yeah, we're free. Yeah, this is awesome. We're getting out of here. And the helicopter just flies by. And so Bryce realizes that that helicopter was to not save them. It was just there to do reconnaissance, to figure out what's going on, to use kind of UVs to see like how far that this possible disease has spread it, and this and that, to probably figure out in some ways possibly what is going on, or figure out where is the safest place to land. So back with Flight in the FBI here, we have Flight who's going on and stating here, it's like, well, hey, like, you know what, if I'm not being brought up on charges, and like I should really have the right to have my attorney present for all this, And like, if anything, like, all this is to just be compared or rationalized as almost kidnapping. And the FBI guys are completely ignoring Flight altogether. And they end talking about one of the goofy stories about Elvis still being alive. And so the FBI guys turns to Flight. It's like, well, hey, you know what? If this story is true, we need to figure out how we can go on and get this bit of information because we've been looking for Elvis for so long. And like that all becomes a joke, and they start laughing because of how stupid this story is. So they now go on, and so like, well, hey, like, we're gonna go on. So Bryce, Jenny, Lisa, they decided, like, well, hey, like, how we all go on and we try to like just leave here, because if anything, like, that should be like their next plan of attack. So they all get in the car, but then they realize that there's no engine in there, or the engine has just kind of been uh freaking crushed and pressed. So like, okay, well, I guess we have to just go on foot. So all of a sudden they hear off in the distance someone like, for God's sakes, help me. And Jenny is sitting, it's like, no, don't fall for that. That's some kind of trick. We start to more and more realize that this monstrous being is trying to figure out ways to just trick people and hope that they fall for it. Kind of like Predator was in the 2010 Predator Topher Grace movie. So we have Flight that goes on and meets up with Copperfield here, and Flight is going on and telling Copperfield that it's like, hey man, like, you can't just go on and just solve this case with guns. And he's like, well, hey, we're not just gonna be going in with guns anyways. It's like we're going in with you basically. Uh, so Flight is going on. I'm like, you know what? I really don't want to go on and deal with this. Like, he's kind of like Jeff Goldblum in the second Jurassic Park movie, where he kind of knows the lay of the land and he knows he's gonna die. So he's probably like, dude, just shoot me right here. Like, just murder me right now. Like, put me out of my misery, like, in a quick way, instead of torturing me with what you're gonna make me forcibly be a part of. So, and he also mentions about how the driver is some stunt driver, which I thought was kind of funny. So we have Copperfield that's going on of like, hey man, like, you need to go on and you need to like tell us about the ancient enemy here. You need to kind of prep this up to the viewer to have us figure out what the heck this thing possibly is. So like, you need to give us the hard science about what this thing really is. And so he ends up laying down that this is a history filled with mysterious disappearances. Uh, Archaeologists nor anthropologists can provide the information about this. December 10th, 1939, the hills outside uh, Nanking in China. An army of 3,000 Chinese soldiers vanished without a trace. Long before reaching the battlefield, no bodies, no graves, no witnesses of a battle. The Mayan cities of Copan, um, Pedras, Negras, Palenque, whatever. Back in 60 AD, deserted overnight. The dinosaurs, murder. So, hundreds of thousands of Mayans missing. Uh, Theories of disease or war never really explained. Why are there no mass graves? Why is there no evidence that Mayan families had gone on and vanished? After preparing dinner, but before eating them, uh, there's a disappearance of an English colony, a on Roanoke Island in 1590. Many others, many. Uh, and so here's where we get to the okay, what is this thing? Chaos in the flesh. So we go on to have Copperfield tell Flight here about all the science gadgety crap that they have. They kind of have this one kind of science lab that almost looks like a tank in a way, and so telling them about all of that jazz, all the the firearms and all these things that they have. So that no terrorists can go on and take out this kind of equipment that they have, blah 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 blah. So, but also Copperfield is to let Flight know about Bryce and them and how they have broken communications, and they've gone on and they've done aerial recon, but everything that they've gone on and tried has kind of just been inconclusive because they just don't know what they're dealing with. So but then they also have a fair amount of group of scientists as well as military guys that are contingent on basically anything, like the Swiss Army knife of people that they can bring in here. So anyways, let's kind of push on here because I know that we're kind of behind time. So back with Bryce and Jenny. So Bryce goes on and he breaks this vending machine and starts to grab all this candy. It's like, well, hey, breakfast and dinner here, because what else can they really just make at this point that they can trust is to be not to probably kill them. So Jenny is thinking that there's no way that they're gonna live. They're all gonna get killed here, and none is gonna survive. And Bryce is like, well, hey, you don't know that, like, and so, and also Jenny's like, well, wait, why is this thing playing with us? The lights, the noises, on the phone, the moth thing that killed Stu. And Bryce is like, well, Bryce is ended up telling Jenny, it's like, well, hey, I don't know, but if anything, just kind of keep your head straight. Let's get out of here, or we'll get out of here. And he's like, I promise you. And she's like, how can you be so sure? And he just has this one candy bar that says luck is on your side. And I thought that was kind of funny. So here's where the Flight and the military guys come in, and so Copperfield ends up meeting up with Bryce. It's like, okay, Sheriff Hammond, uh, I heard that you also had some deputies here. And Bryce is like, well, yeah, they're both dead. So we have Bryce who turns and realizes that Flight is on one of the guy's name things. He's like, oh, hey, yeah, you're the guy that name in the mirror. What connection do you have with what's going on here? And Flight is to say his connection is reluctancy, and how he's just kind of bizarrely just the one guy who knows enough about this, and so on and so forth. So Copperfield ends up asking Price, okay, what kind of threat is this? Is it biological? Is it chemical? Is it is it other? What is this? And so Bryce, from not going on and logically having a real answer here, he's like, well, I think we're more leaning towards other. So we have all these scientists and they're lurking around, and I think here's where I'm going to cut around a lot of things, just to save time. And also, like, none of these scientists are, to me, going to have actual names, even though they do actually have names in the IMDb. I don't have the real care to go on and say who all the scientists' names are. And plus, also, I don't think they mind to anybody to have logical names within this review. So we go on and have certain military men that are in these gas masks. They make their way down the sewer to kind of figure it being some kind of underground problem. And then they also find within the sewer that there uh, are certain things being tampered with down there that could easily have us figure out why uh, why, of course, that there has been some electrical disturbances. So here's where the scientists go on and find this massive shrine down by this church. And so Flight is going on and being with this group of these people. And so we have Flight here who is rationalizing that all of that stuff that had just kind of been compiled was not a shrine. It was just a bunch of stuff to throw away. And then also that the one human being that had gotten just present and been on the floor is just a meal or something to have kind of just been saved up for later, kind of like how a spider would do the same. So we now go to Buckley's garage as one of these scientists are to make their way to this sink because they hear something going on, sounds and whatever from the sink, and so they investigate. And they're going so far as to kind of look what's in the little hole, just kind of figure out, and they end up getting hit with some sludge. And so the guy ends up kind of jumping back, getting hit by some sludge. It's like, oh yeah, it's just some sludge or whatever, it's sewer crap. So we go on to have other scientists and military men that are making their way into one portion of town that is to have like these huge, massive number of sketches of monsters and devils and demons and whatever in this whole book of things. And we come to find that the kid that was, or the guy that was on the bed sleeping, he ends up going on and he kind of appears behind these men, closing the door and killing them. So the military that were making their way into the sewer, they end up getting killed as well. The creature ends up going on and running after Velasquez or something, whatever his name is, Velasquez. And so he tries to get to the ladder to get up to the sewer. By the time that he makes it, he gets dragged away. And then the other guy who is just by the manhole, like he ends up grabbed and killed as well. So here is where we get the dog coming in. And I'm just going to fast track past that because I don't really care. Surgeon Harker meet up outside, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know, whatever it is. Whatever they're saying here with Copperfield or whoever, Rice and all those people. I don't care what they say. Moving on to the church thing to cut some time. So here's where the dog comes in. We have Flight who is looking and it's like, hey man, like, do not touch this dog. And this one guy's like, well, no, like, he's just kind of sad and this and that. It's like, dude, this is another trick, buddy. You don't get it. Like, why is it that this is the only dog that we've ever seen? This is another trick. This is another trap. Come to find out, yep. So, because Flight is going on and saying, it's like, hey man, you better get away from him. And come to find out, by the back of this dog, there's to be this scorpion thing that comes out and starts uh, breaking its way into people's heads and starts just killing them all off one by one. And so all these scientists end up getting jabbed in the head and killed, it seems, but they end up just kind of getting used as puppets for the mother mass, for the creature, for the phantoms. So this military guy goes on and he starts lighting up these scientists and this dog and this everything, and we just have Flight that is going on and just kind of cowering in the back because really for him he has no weapon, he's unarmed, and then also like the monster, the phantom, isn't going to go on and kill him because he needs him to basically write his best-selling novel, The Ancient Evil or The Ancient Enemy, whatever the freaking title it is. I don't remember. But anyways, so, and also I was watching this with subtitle and everything, or every time I think they would talk about the Ancient Evil or the Ancient Enemy, it would say the Ancient Evil in subtitles. So that's what I thought it said. Maybe I was wrong the whole entire time. Anyways, moving on. So all the scientists are to go on and talk to Flight here. Here is where they go on and they state what Flight's purpose is here. So they told him for him to go on and do his research about them, write their gospel, go like, hey man, like learn everything you can about me, because you need to go on and tell the human race how to just get some prep time, I guess. So Flight goes on and he takes off his helmet, and so because he knows he's not going to get killed here because he has a purpose, but Copperfield isn't going to be uh, left alive for very long. Because as Flight is to go on and kind of explain some things, we have Copperfield that ends up getting attacked, and he ends up going on and having a thing of glass come out of his mouth, and he then goes on to give a bit of himself, and it turns into a lizard. And so Copperfield ends up giving this to Flight and saying like, well, hey, like here's a sample of me, so you can go on and like figure out what I am. You can kind of put the pieces together. And let me pause here for a second. All right, I'm going to try to skim the rest of this movie to just kind of try and save time here. So Bryce is going on about how they can go back into that laboratory because it's a tank, and just kind of wait it out. And Flight is saying, it's like, well, no, like if anything, like there's hundreds of ways that it can get to us, and still even through that. So logically, like uh we should just try and just kind of do what it says and try and figure out a plan of attack here. So when it goes on and it takes the life of somebody, this creature is to be able to go on and take all of its knowledge, even its nightmares or creature or monsterish things. Like if it wanted to appear as Freddy Krueger to just kill somebody, it could, just because it has that knowledge of knowing that that monstrous thing exists. And so they try to possibly figure out that it could be some kind of flatworm like thing. Um, and so on and so forth. But so luckily, it seems that Flight is to be able to know everything about this lamp because they had given him a tour. So he's just kind of easily figuring out where every bit and piece and stuff that they need to just kind of dissect this thing logically is. So it's like, hey, I guess that's an easy way to just kind of write ourselves out of the story of just kind of second guessing. Like, wait a minute, how did Flight know everything of where stuff is at this point? Moving on. We have to realize how dominant this being has been and that it's been feeding for years, decades, whichever. And now it's going to go on and use human beings as its prey because just food chain. That's all it has left to really just uh, take on. So, really, at this point, uh, they eventually have to go on and put this thing through a computer and see if it gives them an answer of what this thing could truly be. And we even have the being itself that is also trying to give these people answers by going on and stating that a lot of people would go on and state that this is a demon or a devil, uh, and to also intimidate the human race by telling the world uh, that their end begins here. And so by the time that they finally get to a real answer of what this thing is, and they come to find that it's the uh the petro latium. So we have, of course, Bryce that's like, well, hey, like, what is this thing's weakness? How do we kill it? Like, that's all I care about. Like, if anything, like, it's not a god, it's not a devil, it's just an animal. Like, how do we kill this thing? How do we make it bleed? And like, if anything, they're trying to figure out its weakness, and they realize that it's probably greatest weakness because of how it is to build itself up as a god or a demon or whatever. Is to really just to state here that it's probably just has a massive inflatable ego, so much so that it thinks that it can't be killed whatsoever, but they're concocting a plan. So, and then also to realize that ego is to have been uh, what characters like Satan had as well, and so and Satan had fallen because of his ego. So, and the reason for this creature to turn around and make this town into a funhouse was again because of its own ego. So, and it was the forced mystery or manipulation of bringing forth Flight to this locale and to just kind of play with his food before he eats it. Whole situation. But then also, like, we go on to realize that the ancient enemy wanted to go on and have certain people witness to his uh to his being there. Hence why, like, he didn't go on and kill everybody off. That's why he didn't kill guys like Bryce or Jenny or Lisa or whoever, because logically he was going on and he wanted somebody to witness and write his story. So to have so many people who can kind of count the tale of this monstrous being. So they go on, and here's the part where they mention how, like, how are we going to go on and be able to kill this thing, because this thing has killed the whole entire uh, dinosaurs, and those were pretty tough customers. And Bryce wants to go on and he wants to kill it because, of course, like for years, nothing could get to it, nothing could kill it. And like for the fact that it is just kind of boasted about that fact for however long and just felt that it is to be invincible, like that's what makes it vulnerable. It's just the fact that uh like it's kind of like that whole Avatar thing where the one monstrous thing like never looks up because uh he thinks that no one is going to go after and attack him, but then of course that's when the one guy jumps on top of that one thing and kind of controls it and takes over it, just because the flying being thing never looks up. So they go on and they figure out a way to like chemically kill this thing, which then again creates these guns, these weapons to fire off these certain needled weapon things to kill off this thing. And so we then have forcibly for Bryce to go from certain vehicle to vehicle to get these weapons, all while the dog is kind of being like, "Hey, what's going on? Like, what are you doing? Like, let me go on and just kind of stop you and like intimidate you." And Bryce is going on and just being like, "Well, hey, uh, like I I'm just here to tell your story, to tell your gospel." And the dog is like, "Oh, okay, all right, I don't know if I'm buying this, but okay, sure." uh but also like right before that we also end up getting the whole like the nuking and the acid and this and that. And that's of course where Flight goes on and says, "Well, how can you make sure that you've kind of wiped out everything that you've wiped out?" Getting a little ahead of myself there. But so uh yeah, I got a way ahead of myself. Um, so they're ending up deciding to put a virus into this monstrous being to figure out a way to kind of like uh like from the War of the Worlds to kind of give this monster the flu and try to kill it off that way. Uh, and it's a mad made micro microbius whatever. I don't know. It's some kind of way of killing this thing. So we come to find out that the military is setting a perimeter around this place, and come to find out uh, that the science guys, who are now all phantoms, have made their way to this military force and had decided to just kill them all off. So we also had before Bryce had to go on and make his way to get to, because this is a lot of stuff way before what's going on with Bryce finding the weapons and whatever. Uh, Flight has gone on to need to take off or take out the electricity so the monster won't hear them talk, and so uh, and so supposedly the same thing they had gone on to just figure out how to to break up oil spills is to be the same thing that they're going to use to break up this monster, to kill this monster. And so what it's just like, here's where it just gets a lot of in the weeds and a lot of confusion, a lot of science jargon, blah blah blah. Let's go on. Let's fast forward through this as much as humanly possible. Uh, so when Bryce makes his way back, uh, we now have Flight that is asking uh, everybody. It's like, okay, now that we have the weapons, how are we gonna go on and get the monster to come out? Because we have to go on and we have to get like the mother mass to come out here and not just face off against the drones. Like, could we just have him face off against the drone? Like, this isn't going to work. And also, like, we have only one real shot at this. So everybody's going on and looking at Fight, and Fight is like, oh, so Flight goes out there and he, in a way, words is trying to figure out a way to force this monster's masked ego to decide that he's like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna show you my true self so you can see who I really am. So then like you can see how really powerful I am so you can write this story. So we have Fight that goes out there and says like, well, hey, if I'm to tell the world, I need to see not just a drone. Um and so Flight even goes on further and is to tell the monster exactly what the humans are planning against him. And Bryce is like, oh my god, like, what is he doing? And he's selling us out. And Jenny's like, no, like, he has a plan. Just kind of go with it. So he states that they're coming up with a genetically engineered bacterium. That's what the actual weapon is. Freaking, I couldn't know. Like, they said a bunch of crap during that whole thing. All I just heard was just sciencey jargon, blah, blah, blah. So, but if anything, I kind of much more summarized it now here. So, capable of devouring your flesh, uh, keep, uh, capable, they think, uh, they don't understand that death is for mortals, not for gods like you. Even after all they've witnessed tonight, they still don't believe. They still don't think you're nothing more than an animal. Show yourself. Uh, Gods have nothing to fear, or do they? Like, are you God? Are you a god? What does God need with a starship? That's what. So all of a sudden, all the little drone little characters all appear all at once, and Flight is like, oh, okay, all right. So all the drones end up becoming one mother mass, and it ends up becoming this one big, huge, massive, monstrous being. And so we now have Flight that is just kind of making us call signs like, okay, now would be a good time, like, ka ka, tuki tuki, come on, like, now would be a good time to spring the trap uh, and and have the monster say it's like I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for these witnesses. So so Jenny, Lisa, Bryce, they all come out guns blazing, firing away at this monstrous being, and so they realize that the monster is possibly infected, but like the monster's also just kind of on the ropes right now. So we have Jenny and Lisa who are going into back into the sheriff's office to kind of get more shotguns so they have some kind of defense because I guess they ran out of ammo. But Bryce still has his gun, and so he's going further into figuring out where the monster is so we can attack it further. And this is going to have him face off against his deepest, darkest fear. And so Lisa and Jenny end up facing off against Stu. So Stu ends up telling the girls, like, well, hey, you got some guns? You wouldn't shoot an unarmed man, would you? This is so good. So Stu ends up falling to the ground, and he's like, I fall to pieces. And here's where Stu starts to just become this monstrous being, and very much John Carpenter's The Thing. And Stu is starting to feel a little weak, a little woozy here. So he ends up telling the girls, like, oh, hey, do you slip me a Mickey? So the girls fire into the ceiling, and then they climb up, and eventually Stu gets to them, and from the ceiling, because he can kind of grab onto things and kind of make his way to the girls, they end up going on and shooting Stu in the head, and they take one of the needles and put it into the shotgun and fire away. And so Bryce then makes his way to where the mother mass is, and he faces off against the little boy. And we have the little boy that is telling Bryce, like, well, hey, I'm gonna let you live. I'm gonna let you live in me. And so the monster ends up kind of pushing Bryce away, and so he ends up grabbing the needles that are with this gun. It's like, well, yeah, uh like, man, you still have the urge to just shoot little boys now, don't you? And so Bryce goes on, and he has his little his normal just gun, and he fires and shoots the needles, and the needles break, and the liquid from the needles end up going onto the monster, and that's what kills the monster here, supposedly. And so now, of course, here is where the rest of the group meet together again. And so Flight ends up telling Bryce, it's like, well, hey, like, regardless of what happened here today, like, if anything, the monster still wins. And it's like, well, how so? And Bryce is like, well, hey, I'm still going to tell the story to the world. Like, I'm still going to tell everybody how to beat this thing. And, like, so he still wins at the end of all this, but, like, we still get this little victory. So, like, the earth will endure over the eons, countless species have flourished, then perished. So, we go on and we have turn around Flight, who's on the TV now, and he's making this whole biography and this whole story, this whole tale about the inhuman intelligence, and this and that, and talking about this mysterious world and all that jazz. So the two of these people are at this bar, just kind of hearing this gibberish, uh, this ancient being who would cause this almost human extinction. And so supposedly we have this girl who is talking to this guy at this bar and talking about how Glenn has possibly been abducted by aliens, and so this guy turns to this girl and says, like, well, hey, yeah, like, Glenn probably did get abducted to run away from that girl, and you would have ran off too if you would have been married to Patty. So we all of a sudden have somebody going on and laughing off in the distance, and we have this girl turn to that person's like, "Oh, hey, like, did that sound funny to you there, bub?" And we come to find out that that person is none other than Stu. And so Stu ends up turning to the gal. It's like, "Well, hey, you want to see something? You want to see something?" And that's how the movie ends. I'm gonna get out of here so I can quickly kind of wrap this up. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, I try to as quickly as possible to kind of cut through all the stuff. But then again, I really also didn't know where to where to go on and get to certain things at certain points to kind of fast track this because it's a lot of it's another movie where there's just a lot of dialogue in certain points to just be like, okay, what should I save? What should I cut? And then when we get to like what the defining thing to kill the monster, I'm like, I don't know what the heck that was. It's just some sciencey garbage that they just made up off the fly and whatever, and they just kept talking about it and talking about it, like I'm going on and doing now. So I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.